Here's how I was finally able to fix my screen addiction. In this video, I'll break down why screens are such a strong magnet for your teen son and the 30-day playbook to make him forget all about them. All right, so the problem I faced as a teenager of the pre-smartphone era is that I would spend hours watching TV after school. This is pre-smartphone, pre-iPhone, right? I would come home from school. I lived in Munich. I went to Munich International School starting at age 12, so actually right before I entered adolescence. And I would come home pretty late in the afternoon because it was like a longer kind of school. And I would come home and my brother would already be at home. And we would just watch a lot of TV. We would just spend hours and hours watching TV because back then TV was the main screen. I guess computers were around as well. But I guess as I got older then throughout my teen years, the computer kind of started to replace the TV, but definitely no smartphones back then. Um, this is like early 2000s basically. And the story here is that my dad, he would also come home and he would, we would already be there sitting there in front of the TV, and he would then, the kind of dad that he was, he would be so caring and nurturing. And I think he would kind of like make some, he would usually make some slightly sarcastic remarks about us being in front of the TV, like kind of like saying something like, oh, you guys are back on TV duty. You guys have such a hard life. Like every day you're just spending so much time on this TV, and must be such a hard life, boys. I'm gonna make you some apples. Would you like some apples? And so, I mean, this is maybe a bit exaggerated, but it's more or less what my dad did and how he operated. Instead of, you know, enforcing something or telling us this is not allowed, or like setting a limit, he would just kind of comment on it in his own laconic way. And then he would actually kind of almost encourage it by giving us the apples sliced on a platter, on a plate, to make it even more, let's say, comfortable, right? Spending all this time in front of the TV and watching all this crap. So it's just a funny story, but in a way, it's also not really that funny because, um, well, because he didn't exactly help us maybe do something different, and he could have set a different standard there. Anyway, so back then the problem I faced was obviously no mentor, no demands from parents. So this little story there from my dad illustrates that, but it went beyond that, right? Because there were just no things ever demanded of me or that I had to do. Like that is not how I was raised. It was very hands off. Maybe my mom did a little bit of that, but also not really. So there were no responsibilities. We were never expected to clean up around the house. I mean, I guess after ourselves, yes, we learned that, but we didn't ever have to, like, we never had chores or anything like that. Everything was just handed to us, given to us. There was no structure in that sense. So this kind of infinite freedom uh, is a problem that you don't realize at the time that you're facing, but in hindsight, it's perfectly clear that it is a problem. And I guess the only exception here being school. Like, of course, I did have to go to school and I did have to like pass my stuff. But also here, actually, there were not. I mean, I just kind of naturally, you know, um, slide by. I never put a lot of effort into school. I just kind of passed on slightly better than average marks. Um, but also here, like nothing was really expected. There was no authoritative kind of language or communication being used to make us like to give us a push or to make us perform better. There was just like this infinite kind of relaxed, laissez-faire attitude about everything. And some people envied me for that a lot. A lot of people said, "Wow, your parents are so chill, man," and that kind of thing, right? But I don't think that's a good thing to the extent that it happened where in my house. So I do think that's a problem. Um, and real quick, like screens are not the root cause. They're the symptom that fills the void social anxiety has created. I have talked about this in an earlier video, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot more. But screens are not really the evil in and of itself. Screens are just filling a void that, like, they're the main symptom of something that is not being engaged by real life, right? Like, we were never asked or expected to do anything, so we just kind of, we had all this time in the world, other than doing our homework. We had all this time in the world to just like relax and slack off, and we were also not really pushed very much to do after curriculars. Although I did a little bit of soccer practice here and there, but never really with a lot of regularity. Yeah, so I mean that's more or less how it looked back then, and it's also it just goes to show that um, in the pre-smartphone era, screens already were a problem, right? I mean, now they're even bigger. They're a much bigger problem, but we also spent way too much time watching TV and then being on our like clunky big computers that we had, or that I had. At least my brother didn't have one, but I think I had one. Yeah, I definitely had one. My brother, I don't think, had a computer back then because he was a lot younger. But I, like, starting at 14, 15, I believe, I had my own computer in my room, and that was the screen that I spent a lot of time on as I advanced in my teenage years, right? Like, the TV was being replaced by the computer then, and yeah. So this goes back more than 20 years, 25 years, something like that. Um, so if you want a copy of this Google Doc and to learn more about helping your son build agency and purpose, I'm sharing it in my free community. So click the link in the description to join. Okay, so what did I do? The steps I took to overcome my problem, well, um, maybe go back to watching yesterday's video as well, because what I propose for your son is something that, in my case, happened much later. So it's not exactly one on. It's not. We can't really translate it one to one. Everything I did, I figured out later, right? Than what I preach or suggest your son do, or that you do as a family, because you have to make the decision as a parent. It's your responsibility, not your son's. Your son's not going to do it. He's a boy. So that, just that basic framework, or the idea of prevention over healing, that's yesterday's video. So I really encourage you to watch that. So real quick, what is your son curious about? The answer is other kids his age. So his biological imperative is to crave respect like a baby craves food and sleep. Because as kids slide into adolescence, the hormonal changes in their bodies are you know they are part of why their psychological needs experience a fundamental shift, which is um, recognition from others, especially from within their peers. So becoming part of a group of peers is a big part of this, or is like the main thing. And then within that group, earning his status. And this is actually called earned prestige. This concept of earning his status, earning his respect within his group of peers, as well as from you and adults. And this is based on the work by David Yeager in the book 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People, which I highly encourage and recommend. And so that's just like kind of the backbone here. But then the actual social curiosity playbook that I took, that I recommend for your son, is the first 14 days of the 30 days are designed as a game and build 4 core skill trees. And I call them stability. So that is, can I stay in a moment without escaping? Then initiative, can I start things instead of waiting? Recovery, can I mess up and not spiral? And agency, am I acting by choice? These are the 4 categories that I have designed for myself, and this was back in, because I'm 39 now, and I did this when I was in my early 30s. So this is, you know, this is something that I did in my 30s, right? And that's why, again, it's really good to watch my video about, uh, I recommend everything that I did myself in my 30s that your son do 20 years earlier when he's 13, as opposed to 33. And so yeah, that is more or less, I mean, these four categories: stability, initiative, recovery, agency, are really useful, especially for a younger teen. That's why it's designed as a game. These are like daily micro missions where he doesn't yet necessarily um, learn how to like initiate a conversation, because that's going to be the second half of that 30-day thing. And that's so in the first 14 days, it's just kind of like some, for example, stability, the stability category that there might be around, for example, staying in the moment a bit longer than he usually might, than he usually would. And for example, like holding eye contact a few seconds longer until it feels awkward. And that's actually a good sign. Like when something starts feeling awkward, but you are able to sit through it, that's a good sign that you're doing something right. So that's just one example there. And then let's jump to the 16 days after that, because they zero in on actually striking up micro interactions with people, for example, neighbors of all ages. For example, perhaps like your widowed, granny kind of neighbor lady that you might help, you might help her with her groceries. I mean, your son might. And that's a useful task or exercise. And then obviously, you start to practice small talk as you do these things for her and with her. And but it could also be a man that you're helping, like a neighbor, a male neighbor. It could be a middle-aged woman neighbor. It could be anyone really. I'm just going with neighbors here because it makes sense to think of that little close-knit community around us where we live physically in the house, where we live, the home. And then eventually, these kind of little these micro interactions where we get more, where the teen son gets more accustomed to and comfortable with small talk. That's then a great way to shift to more intimidating situations when he's ready, because obviously his curiosity needs to be channeled. And when I say that, it's quite clear. I mean, also like talking to girls he might find cute, and just like being able to strike up conversations with the people he wants to connect with and that he's curious about. That's why um, that is like the best and the most primal way that we can serve that social curiosity and that craving for respect and prestige and status that I mentioned earlier, according to the David Yeager book, by basically going out there and making it known that we are interested in something, but we have the social skills and the social calibration to communicate that without freaking anybody out. I think I think it's common sense that this is something that is good to practice as early as possible. Like I'm not like encouraging 7-year-olds to do this or 9-year-olds, like those are kids. But actually some kids are actually quite unfiltered and don't have this self-consciousness at all to be scared of that. The problem is when we lose it as we enter, as we like kind of grow out of the child phase of like 10, 11, and then enter adolescence. That's when self-consciousness skyrockets. And that's when we lose all that ability to just kind of initiate conversations and interactions. And because we're just so self-conscious, and we just become extremely worried, preoccupied with what others might think of us, right? And there's a lot of shame around it. And that's why this is really the core work that I do and that I did for myself in my early 30s. Of course, that's after years and years of also doing little things and trying things out, but I didn't really actually overcome my social anxiety until my early 30s, when I actually ran such a 30-day social curiosity challenge slash the playbook, right? So the outcome is, in my particular case, I rid myself of of a pesky screen and especially porn addiction once and for all, when I was able to actually go through the 30-day thing, as I mentioned, uh, in my early 30s. And obviously, it's hugely beneficial to start doing social curiosity and practice. I mean, to practice and to serve that need for your curiosity. It's hugely beneficial to start as early as 13, 14, because then you just have a lifetime ahead of you to practice that and to become a social master, a social skills master. And that is just going to set you up for life. And so that's again how my situation greatly differs from your son's. Um, and so, yeah, the outcome you get that I got is social calibration and social freedom. Social freedom basically means just being completely untethered to any outcome or thinking or worrying about what others think of us. We just are able to interact with the world freely and from a place of abundance. And it's just a wonderful thing. And the world would be a much better place if a lot of people had more social calibration and more social freedom. And unlimited networking opportunities in my private life, but in my business life as well. Like, social skills are the fundamental need of every person in order to feel like they have agency and purpose in life. And so screens will completely exit the picture there, or almost completely. I mean, we're still going to use screens obviously for certain things, and we can still occasionally go and swipe and whatever, do stuff on social media. I mean, uh, but it's still going to be a massive difference compared to what it was before. So I'm not saying like screens are completely, evil and they're gonna exit our lives forever, but there's just going to be a whole lot less of a need for them, because we're going to be stimulated in so many better ways that are in line with our physical makeup and biology and wiring, right? Because the screen doesn't um, actually demand anything of us. We're just passive consumers of stuff, of content, as opposed to actually creating content by interacting with somebody and actually having to think on your feet and just be a human person, right? A human being. All right. So if I currently have 3 spots open to work with me one-on-one to help your son build social skills. If you're curious, there's a link to apply in the description. First come, first serve. All right, so just real quick to wrap up here, I'm going to wrap up with the lessons learned. The sooner we start building social skills, the sooner we will forget about screens. The less we drain our time into screens, the more aligned we are with building a purposeful life. I think I've said this in as many words before, so I'm not going to repeat myself. And I think the lesson or the message is clear. And this is pretty much what this channel is all about, because screens seem to be the biggest problem that you are facing with your son, based on what I've heard. But if there's anything different that you would like me to make a specific video about, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.